Well,
Sarah, Dan is channeling his inner Roy Keane here.
Well, look, actually, I read Emer Ryan's book at the weekend, The Grass Ceiling, and I think it might explain a lot about the Cork people. She's from the Midlands, obviously. She's from Moneygall, and she described the Cork dressing room as far more flamboyant than the Moneygall dressing room. These are the bars girls in the city, so she used the word flamboyant, so I'm going to go with that. That's very complimentary, we'll say.
Dan, can you? What did you make of the Camogie spectacle? Big crowd. Obviously, I guess they're trying to get on to the ladies' level, but this is potential, I think.
Well, no, like we spoke to Sarah about it on Thursday, I think it was. I mean, the crowd is upwards of 30,000 for the first time since 2007. I was just thinking about that as well. Like, I suppose you look at it is compared with the football final, but I think as Sarah mentioned it, you've often had Dublin or Meath involved. Generally, there's more travelling involved. I know the weekend event, there's other finals on as well too, so it's not just about two teams. But it always strikes me as odd that there's that discrepancy between the crowd figures, but I suppose geography can explain a bit, and maybe there's more politics around promotion and stuff that Sarah's way better placed to talk about than either of us. But it seems to be a step in the right direction, at least.
Yeah, I thought she'd be delighted with the crowd, Sarah, considering again Camogie's really at its infancy here in terms of where it could be, I think.
It's niche.
Yeah,
it's niche. I suppose it's played in less places well than hurling is, and we talk about the hurling struggles all of the time. So you only have 3 teams who've consistently competed in the competition since, say, 2012. It was Waterford's first time appearing in the final since 1945. Other teams had failed, like Wexford were the last team to get there in 2012, and since then it's been Cork, Kilkenny, Galway, Cork, Kilkenny, Galway, and the second teams of Cork, Kilkenny, Galway kept appearing in the intermediate final, which meant the numbers were halved again. You know, this weekend we had 6 different counties involved, so you'd 6 different chances to get as many people there as you could. So I thought they did really, really well to get over 30,000 people there this weekend, and hats off to them for that.
Commenting from Colin McCarthy, Camogie should be on the day before the hurling. A ticket to the hurling final should get you into the Camogie, and they can get better attendances up, make a weekend of it. What do you make of that?
Dan, I was saying to you last week, the League of Ireland doesn't get the same questions about why their showpiece competition is only at 30,000. What's the fixation on it? Like, if the League of Ireland's FAI competition, which is, you know, the best competition in the country, is only hitting 30,000, is this an issue that we're making more of an issue of?
Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
No. Listen, my point is, and I said it, Sarah, last week, it's more to me, I think there's too much of a focus on the one day. There's that's a big part of the Irish sport mentality, is to have the one day attendance. And like, personally, for me, even like, you know, the ladies football final, say we'll get a big figure, and as always, well, this is the biggest event in Europe that day. I'm looking at that going, okay, that's great, but you've done a big promotion for today, you know, and like, you know, running buses, and that's brilliant. But to me, surely it's about more consistency and stuff like that. Like League of Ireland wise, for example, the best thing this year is the attendances are up week on week all of the time.
Yeah.
And like the cup final, sometimes we think, they should fill it by doing more promotion around that event. But I don't know how I feel sometimes about tagging something onto a weekend. I think you need to make it the main event of the weekend rather than making it the undercard to something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be my opinion. There could be different opinions on that.
Sarah, when I'm watching, so I watched the highlights last night of the Camogie, and it's the same thing in hurling except it's amplified. How do you get this sport out to all corners of Ireland? Because Camogie could be exceptional across all corners of Ireland. And then I'm thinking, like, what has this done for Waterford Camogie, in the sense that it's an absolute obliteration? The first half kind of went against them. Does it, you know, it wasn't the showcase that you wanted in terms of that competitiveness?
The Camogie Association are at fault here,
right,
and I'd be very critical of that. They didn't seed the competition. It was last year 2 groups of 6 with, you know, the top 4 coming out, and it was seeded. This year it was 3 groups of 4. Waterford were in the 3rd group, we'll say. They trounced Offaly, Limerick and Antrim. And they came into a semi-final and beat a very fancy Tipp team in horrible conditions in Nolan Park. And I will say, to Dan's point, there was 7,500 people in Nolan Park for both semi-finals, which adds to your point. It's not just the showpiece that was getting the big numbers, but they beat Tipp by a point. Tipp were devastated because they genuinely thought they were in the final, I think. And then they go into the final, and Grace Walsh made a great point on the show on Sunday night. There was no experience. None of the players in that Waterford team had any of experience of playing in a senior All-Ireland final in Croke Park. Of the Cork team, 12 players had All-Ireland medals already. The Camogie Association, if they had seeded the competition, wouldn't have had that pairing, but then they wouldn't have had 30,000 people in Croke Park. So were they looking for the numbers, or were they looking for the quality? And the blame lies with them.
On Cork themselves, obviously, it was a hell of a performance. Not to mention Amy. All of the Cork team can say more or less like they were dominant from start to finish. Just looking at it, so you've Liam Cronin and Michelle O'Connor coming in, maybe credited with change of form. Where did this happen from their league sort of performances, and how did they actually peak at the right time, I suppose? So
they've lost to Galway pretty much consistently over the last number of years. Galway were identified as their bogey team, and in the league final this year they had a chance, I suppose, to put that to bed, right? But they didn't go well in Croke Park. If you were to watch the game in Croke Park on Sunday and the game in Croke Park on Easter weekend, two completely different games, and a completely different style of play from Cork. They were overcarrying the ball, they were holding up the ball in the delivery zones, their inside line was absolutely starved of ball in that league final. Galway incredibly well set up defensively, and every time the ball went in and it was taking too long to go in, the backs were coming out with the ball. Fast forward to this weekend, and Cork's distribution was outstanding, but not just from Hannah Looney, who had 18 possessions. It was Maeve Callan, it was Izzy O'Regan, it was Laura Tracy. It was a complete performance from Cork. The amount of ball that Katrina Mackey and Amy O'Connor got. Amy O'Connor had 10 possessions and she scored 3-7. Mackey had 11 possessions, hit 2 points, but she assisted in the 2 goals. Massively unselfish play from Mackey, but 4-10 from the inside full forward line with Circa McCartan tugging in with 1-1. Talk
to me about Circa McCartan as well, just about this remarkable down kind of background as well, which is probably bridging a 44-year gap here.
Yeah, with her dad, obviously famous down footballer. She was coming to Cork for placement, and Eagle Eyes in Cork recognised the name and parachuted her into the bars in Cork. And they didn't waste time, parachuted her into the Cork setup. And I suppose I've played down over the years with Dublin and with Cork, actually, in All-Ireland finals. And there's a pocket in Ulster that really loves its camogie. So you've got Neve Malin as well from Down, would be very similar to Beth Carton in the amount of work she gets through in games. So real quality in that Down setup. So for one of Down's players to come to Cork, Cork were quickly on getting her involved in the squad. And you could see when she celebrated her goal on Sunday what it meant to her, and I suppose how she's been enveloped by the Cork setup and how she's been welcomed.
Where do Waterford go from here? And like, for Sean Power, like, what do you say in the dressing room after that? Because it's so deflating.
It's a 19-point loss, lads. It's, I suppose, from last week, I don't know, did you sense my nervousness last week? Or Dan, you might have. I said 6, but I was afraid that it was going to be more. I said that Cork would win by at least 6, and winning by 19 was on the cards last week, because I suppose defensively they didn't have the same quality in their defensive 6. Individually, very good camogie players, but they didn't have the experience of Kilkenny. They didn't have the experience of Galway. That's been built up over the course of 10 years, So you can't just put that into a team in the space of 3 months. And they lost Vicky Faulkner after 2.5 minutes. And I was saying, Iona Heffernan, who was on the bench, I don't even think she'd gotten around to the idea that she was going to be in after 2.5 minutes. So all of a sudden she's parachuted in to mark, one of the Cork forwards. Amy O'Connor sees a chink of breathing space because Vicky Faulkner's gone, and she's the ball over the bar in the next exchange. Everything went wrong for Waterford, but ultimately they wouldn't have been fast enough and they weren't prepared enough. And that goes with the camogie.
I was in Mallow yesterday at the races, so I got the train home, and it was lovely to see all the red and white flags, and I was waiting maybe 45 minutes to train, so I went into the waiting room and did all these photos of past Cork winners of All Irelands, and it was going back to like Mulcahy and Jimmy Barry Murphy, and you had then the camogie players as well, and it was really cool to see. And it wouldn't be the Examiner without Rebel Rain, drought over, are Cork now set to dominate camogie? And this is always a question after obviously demolition like that, but it's not as straightforward as that, Sarah, either. And like people, you know, like Kilkenny and Galway and Tipp are watching at home and saying, right, that's not going to happen to us next year.
Yeah, but this Cork team hadn't won since 2018, and I know Hannah Looney described it as a famine in Cork, but that group had done, you're looking at 100 sessions a year, right? For 6 years they'd done 100 sessions. They were up on 600 sessions, and they hadn't won the trophy that they were looking for. It could be, you know, domination for the next 6 years, or those girls who've spent 6 years trying to get back to the Hogan stand could decide, I don't have enough to give.
Yeah,
like there will be an erosion of the panel in some way. The Cork were very lucky to have Katrina Mackey and Pamela Mackey back in the squad, because they've been around the squad far beyond, you know, that group that's there now. You know, their career spans over a decade. So swings and roundabouts, it took them so much to get here and win. It may not be that you know, they'll all stick around in the next couple of years. So I suppose the only other thing that I'll say to that is the bench that Cork were able to bring on. You know, they've 20 or 25 players that are at that level that Waterford aren't at. So Cork certainly have an opportunity here if they stay in and bed in. Maybe they'll get a 3 in a row, but we haven't done it.
Dana's young daughter, and I imagine she's going to have plenty of options as to what sport she wants to play as she gets older. How does the association sell this sport? Because I was just looking at this game on Sunday. It is so marketable in so many ways and really, really unique. But it's so peripheral. It has to start from somewhere, and it's a big philosophical question. It's a big organisational question for the organisation. But this sport has to be sold because it should have so much going for it. So
the Camogie Association and the ladies football are incredibly lucky that for the period of about 5 until 10 or 11, the mini leagues comprises both boys and girls. So once girls are, you know, into a GA club structure, for the first 5 or 6 years it's run by the GA, and they have full exposure, they have all of the same resources. And then it gets tricky after age 10 when the girls have to branch off, because then you're relying on coaches, you're relying on club resources, and it just depends on how strong the Camogie club or the ladies football club, or whether there's a one club model in the club. That's the point where the Camogie and ladies football have to step in and really look at how they're coaching it. I had a text from an old colleague of mine from Neve Malin yesterday. There was a blitz run in Dublin, and he said brilliantly well organised, but it was all men, all coaches, all male coaches, all male managers with the groups of girls. And we're incredibly lucky that, you know, dads like Dan are going to pick up work with their daughters and you know, coach them to be athletes and sportswomen. But the Camogie Association really needs to drive this in terms of getting players and former players back to the pitch and, you know, involved in coaching. So it's a very, very hard thing to do, but I think you have to see women on the pitch, on the sidelines, for it really to grow.
Where are you living in Dublin again, sir?
I moved to Cork.
Oh, you're back in Cork, yeah.
I'm back in Cork, yeah, but I was managing Neve Malin last year in Dublin for a year.
Lovely. I thought you were part of the big move to Dublin there. Well, listen, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, guys.
We have a few